Hey folks, so in this video you're going to see me react to some of the supposedly great Ben Shapiro moments, the Ben Shapiro destroys moments. So it begins.
Being brave is being yourself, and being transgender is about the bravest thing you can do. Did she deserve the award?
65?
Yes.
Why are we mainstreaming delusion?
It's not delusion.
Why would you call it delusion?
Because Bruce Caitlyn Jenner, I'll call him Caitlyn Jenner.
No,
because
it's
that's
her. You're not being polite to the pronouns.
Because
disrespectful.
Okay, forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings. It turns out that every chromosome, every cell in Caitlyn Jenner's body is male with the exception of some of his sperm cells. It turns out that his brain structure is male. It turns out that he still has all of his male appendages. How he feels on the inside is irrelevant to the question of his biological sex.
I don't agree with that. I'm not on that train. I'm not on that train. She wants to be called she. I'm going to call her she.
So you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on
Would you
genetics.
like to discuss the genetics or no?
Well, no,
what
no.
are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion. Yeah, this one was wild. There's a lot to this particular backstory. So, first of all, I was invited on the program, and backstage, the producer says, you know, I used to produce Jerry Springer. This should have been my first hint that things were going to get wild. And I said, you know my perspective on this. And the person said, right, that's why we're having you on. We want it to be like a lively debate. We want you to just express your opinions and everything. All right, fine. So then the way they seat this, obviously, is they seat Zoey Tur right next to me. And pretty quickly, this thing goes off the rails, because the moment that anybody suggests that perhaps a genetic male is actually a genetic male, and that a genetic male who believes he is a female is just a delusional male, that apparently is unsayable. Now, again, that's not to suggest that gender dysphoria isn't tragic. It is tragic. But to suggest that a person with gender dysphoria is therefore a member of the sex to which they claim membership is, of course, absurd on its face. So, as you can see, this debate started to go off the rails even before Zoey Tur decided to get physical in the debate. You can see people saying that I'm being disrespectful to pronouns, which is bizarre because pronouns, aside from facts not having feelings, actually pronouns don't have feelings either, as it turns out. And then the entire movement of the debate away from the realm of the rational toward we're just going to insult people, and Zoey Tur suggested, you don't know anything about genetics, little boy, you don't know anything about genetics. And when I asked him about his genetics, that's when the physical threat came out. What was funny is right after this, when the rest of the panel immediately swiveled and turned on me. You knew you were going to offend Zoey that way. You knew you were going to offend Zoey. Okay, well, number one, I generally refer, I mean, honest to goodness, I promise you this. I was not thinking in the moment, I'm going to call this person sir in order to insult them. This is a large physical male sitting next to me who's speaking directly to me. And that's how I speak to men. I mean, this is a man. And so it sort of came out unconsciously. And then the fact that Zoey Tur got physical about it and started making physically violent threats on the set, that was something I didn't expect to happen. My main reaction there was just puzzlement. I honestly could not believe that this was a thing that was happening on national television. It was absolute bizarro world. After this happened, Zoey Tur, on the way out, kind of growled at me, "I'll see you in the parking lot, little boy." And I was like, well, that is a weird take. As my mother later said, not very ladylike behavior. And I said, well, no, I'm not gonna meet you in the parking lot. That's a thing that's not going to happen. And then later, of course, Zoey Tur threatened to curb stomp me on Twitter, also not super ladylike behavior. And the debate turned into, you're not allowed to use somebody's pronouns when you are, somebody's proper genetic pronouns, when you are talking to them on national TV. Now, as I've said before, if I am in a conversation with somebody at dinner and they're a friend, this is not a public debate, I'll call you whatever you want to be called. I really don't care. But when it comes to having a public debate about whether a male is in fact a male or a female is in fact a female, I'm not going to cede the ground of the argument by going along with the lie that a genetic male is in fact a female. So that's sort of the backstory there. What a bizarre moment in time that was. My goodness. this is pretty famous because obviously I'm flipping off the protesters. I wasn't just flipping them off randomly. What happened is that the person who I was flipping off started flipping off the entire crowd as well as me. And so that is a defensive flip-off. Han did not fire first in this particular case. So they were flipping me off, and I flipped them back off. The whole thing was ridiculous. You had a bunch of protesters. They lined up in front of the stage. They held the thing up for about 15 minutes. We were told that they couldn't be cleared from the room because if the police cleared them from the room, then they would have to clear everyone from the room for some odd reason, which of course is silliness. These folks also didn't seem to understand that I had chalk and a movable chalkboard behind me, so that allowed me to do the little visual sight gag there by writing morons on the board and putting it right above them as sort of a placard. But it does demonstrate the level of debate that's being had on some of these college campuses. I'm not sure what shouting safety has to do with anything. Last time someone shouted safety at me, we were in 7th grade and someone had farted, but these kids apparently decided that it was a great idea to shout safety as though there was some sort of threat to them, with a bunch of police officers in the room and with everybody treating them quite civilly. I remember I actually walked up to the front of the stage. I said to somebody, do you want to have a discussion on this stuff? Like, do you want to, at some point, do you want to actually like talk about this? And the person kind of realized I was talking to them and shook their head, said no. And we waited for them to leave, and then finally they took off. But again, this is not high-level debate, and it just demonstrates how counterproductive some of these protests are, because they got much more attention for the speech by being idiots than they ever would have if they had just ignored it.
Were you scared at the time?
No, this wasn't a scary one. There are a few of these college speeches that have been scary. This was definitely not a scary one. My security was off to the side of the room. There were several cops there, and frankly, this did not look like a particularly threatening group of human beings. So I may not be a jiu-jitsu warrior, but I felt confident in my capacity to maintain my own physical safety with this particular crowd. And this is how it's written. And there it is, gang. Guess what? You know what? They're not going to stop us. All right. Melina Abdullah's fan, Ruben Martin, wrote, "You want I should hoid 'em, boss. I got a few's ideas me and the fella's been kicking round. Only ting is, he won't be talking or looking so nice no more. We'll take the cannolis." The reason I'm reading it in this way is because this is exactly how it's written. Hoydem is spelled Hoywt''E''M. Speaking of Professor Abdullah, she posted this on her Facebook wall earlier this week. Folks, if you're just joining the live stream, somebody pulled the fire alarm to stop this, because this is how the fascists do it. So this one was actually the wildest college experience. And this was one of the first ones that sort of led off the entire college tour. It really led off at University of Missouri, but this was shortly thereafter. University of Missouri was 2015. This was February 2016, I believe. And the students outside who had decided to essentially riot. I mean, they were outside, they were threatening people, they were pushing people around in the crowd. We were told by the police they couldn't guarantee our safety if we left the room. I had to be escorted in by a set of police officers. I had to be escorted out back door by a set of police officers. It was quite amazing. All of that was because there were professors at the university who were seriously suggesting that I was a white supremacist, like a KKK member, which is pretty incredible. The students had to be smuggled in 2 at a time. The whole thing was just a complete bleep show from beginning to end on the part of the university. It ended with a lawsuit, actually. But this is one of the few times where I think I wasn't physically afraid because I had so many police officers around me and I had security, but I was afraid for the other students. Because at one point I said to the students, "Do you guys want to go out there and we'll have a talk with some of the people outside?" And the police were like, "No, you don't. No, that is a bad idea." And so they said, "We can protect you, we can't protect the other students." I said, "Okay, we'll just wait inside." We literally waited inside until the crowd dissipated. It was pretty incredible. Somebody obviously pulled the fire alarm in there because they wanted to shut down the speech. The speech, by the way, was all about how diversity of thought was important, but diversity of race wasn't particularly important, which I thought was relatively uncontroversial, because I'm not sure why skin color should be the be-all, end-all, or even a significant factor in life. But that was, too much for the kids at CSULA to handle, apparently. Do you actually think that Donald Trump colluded with Vladimir Putin?
Yes.
Do you?
You don't?
My follow-up.
How can you not? How can you not?
Okay, so I do not, because I watched that campaign. I don't think that Donald Trump could collude with his own left foot.
Well, I don't think he did it, but his son did it. The people who Mueller is
And when the
indicting.
evidence comes out, I'm happy to go for the indictments. I'm fine with the indictments.
Great.
Okay, criminal activity is criminal activity.
But you see
That's
what
fine.
you see.
But I'm not going to attribute to Trump something he didn't do when he's too ignorant to have done it.
Well, he's not too ignorant. He's not too ignorant to be a criminal, Ben. He's been a criminal his whole life.
Okay, but
we've seen that.
Bill.
He's a scam artist. He's a con artist.
I don't know how I turned into the Trump defender here, but is he a doofus or is he an evil genius? You got to pick one.
Okay. Actually, you don't. You don't have to pick one.
Really?
Look, I'm not saying he's like Hitler, but I am not.
Here is very.
But Hitler was crazy, and he was a genius at what he did, which was lie and manipulate people. So you can be both.
What was funny about the Bill Maher interview is that, first of all, I enjoy Bill Maher. I think that Bill Maher will say shockingly true things from time to time. I mean, he's definitely down the line lefty on a lot of policy, but not when it comes to things like free speech and the willingness to talk with the other side. Like that's stuff that Bill Maher is correct about. He is less politically correct than a lot of his colleagues. What was weird about this particular episode of Bill Maher is a few things. One, the timing was weird. So I can only do Bill Maher like once a year because they do it live on Friday nights, and that means that I can only do it when Friday night, like Shabbat, comes in very late. So we can basically do it one time a year. So this one time that year, I could only stay for like the first 15 minutes and then I had to run. And we actually negotiated with them that I would do that but not be on the panel. I'd have to take off as soon as I did the lead interview. My assumption was, and all the pre-interviews were about free speech, college campuses, ability to talk to one another, and all of the rest. About 5 minutes before the show happens, his producer comes in and says, Bill really wants to talk about Trump and Russia. And I was like, really? What? Wait, why? Remember, this was in the middle of the Mueller investigation, but nothing had really come out at that point that was supremely damning. I said, we can talk about that, but I'm not sure there's going to be that much there. It turned into like a 15-minute conversation about Trump and Russia, and so it kind of went in a different direction than I thought it was going to go. But it was demonstrative of one thing, which is that when it comes to President Trump, there are a lot of people who read the headline and they don't read the body of the story. And so they get from the headline, Trump, Russia, collusion, evil, manipulative, election stealing, and then they don't read the story where it turns out that the headline is a vast oversell. And that was really the story of Trump-Russia collusion. It was a vast oversell by the media. It was a vast oversell by the Democrats. And that bled down to people like Bill, I think. I think even the audience started to recognize, you can hear it in some of the clips, that the logic just doesn't hold together. That at a certain point you have to acknowledge that Donald Trump is either a boob or he's a genius, and it can't be all of these things. And so when you actually say to an audience, people who disagree, listen, we have the same moral standard here. You break the law, you go to jail. But I just don't think the evidence is there. It makes it very difficult for people to argue with that point. I mean, we agreed on the fundamentals, right? You can even see this. We're agreeing on the fundamentals, which is if you break the law, you go to jail. If somebody colluded to steal the election, you go to jail. And you shouldn't be president. But I was just saying all you need is the evidence here, and no evidence was actually presented. Honestly, Piers, you've kind of been a bully on this issue because what you do, and I've seen it repeatedly on your show, I watch your show, and I've seen it repeatedly, what you tend to do is you tend to demonize people who differ from you politically by standing on the graves of the children of Sandy Hook, saying they don't seem to care enough about the dead kids. If they cared more about the dead kids, they would agree with you on policy. I think we can have a rational political conversation about balancing rights and risks and rewards of all of these different policies, but I don't think that what we need to do is demonize people on the other side as being unfeeling about what happened in Sandy Hook.
How dare you accuse me of standing on the graves of the children that died there? How dare you?
I've seen you do it repeatedly, Piers.
Like I say, how dare you?
Well, I mean, you can keep saying that, but you've done it repeatedly. What you do, and I've seen you do it on the program, is you keep saying to folks that if they disagree with you politically, then somehow this is a violation of what happened in Sandy Hook. And you have yet, I'd really like to hear your policy prescriptions for what we should do about guns. Because you say that you respect the Second Amendment, and, you know, I brought this here for you so that you can read it. It's the Constitution. And I would really like for you to explain to me what you would do about guns that would have prevented what happened in Sandy Hook. Okay, so this was maybe my first big TV appearance. I'd done some TV before this. I'd been on Dennis Miller's show on CNBC before that. I had done Joe Scarborough's show back when it was called Scarborough Country on MSNBC. That was back in 2004. But this was the first one where people really started to take note of, oh, this guy is actually fairly good at debating. There were a couple things that I had planned. So I had planned right from the outset that I was going to tell him exactly why I thought he was a bully. And that's because he had written a column specifically on this topic, and because his producers had basically said he's going to bring this up. So I knew I was going to say that. I also knew that at some point I was going to hand him the Constitution because he clearly didn't care about it and really didn't know much about it. And so that was pre-planned. I mean, otherwise, I don't routinely just carry around a pocket Constitution. I have most of it up here. So the interview starts, and Piers opens, and this is not going the way that he thought it was going to go. Like 2 nights before, he'd had on Alex Jones, and that made a big splash for him because Alex Jones is nuts. And so Alex Jones had threatened him, like, if you take my guns, I'm gonna come after you with this gun. I'm gonna shoot you, right? That kind of thing. And that's exactly what Piers Morgan wanted, because he wanted to portray gun ownership advocates as crazy people who are ready and raring to go when it comes to shooting people. He has me on. I start off, I'm being pretty reasonable, I think. He got very offended, obviously, by the fact that I suggested that he was standing on the graves of the kids at Sandy Hook to push a political agenda, but that's pretty much what he was doing. That was his tactic at the time. And he had actually, they're a little behind the scenes, they went to break a little bit early because he didn't really like how it was going. And he brought in they wheeled in somebody in a wheelchair who'd actually been a victim of a shooting. And I could see they were getting ready to swivel the camera so that he could say, look at this poor child who shot it, and then, are you gonna say to this person that you still think that guns ought to be legal? And I'd already foreclosed that by saying that he was actively utilizing people who were hurt in shootings or killed in shootings as props for a political agenda, as opposed to having a rational discussion about risks and rewards and benefits of particular gun policies. It took it away from him. The part of this interview that people always forget is the part where he brought out the Sudafed boxes and tried to suggest that it was harder to buy Sudafed than it was to buy a gun, which of course is not remotely true. If you buy a gun from a federally licensed firearms dealer, there's in many cases a waiting period. You have to go through a background check. But in any case, as the interview finishes, I said to him, thanks, Mr. Morgan. That was really great. I really appreciate it. And he kind of snarled at me. He wasn't super happy. One of the funniest things about this interview is, of course, the afterlife of the interview. So this made big waves. It sort of blunted the impact of, he had been gaining some ratings momentum. It wasn't great for his show on CNN. But the part that was pretty amazing is that fast forward a few years, and Piers has been moved on from CNN, and now we're pretty friendly. Like Piers Morgan's actually a really great guy. Like I actually like Piers a lot. I think he's an interesting guy. I think that he has learned some things about the Constitution, or at least how much we value the Constitution here in the United States. Certainly he wasn't, in the Sunday special I did with him, he wasn't taking the little book and throwing it at me anymore. So that was definitely an upside. Just goes to show you that a lot of the political debate you see on TV is TV, and some of it is real. But if you can see each other as human beings, the likelihood is that more of our conversations would look more like my Sunday special, and fewer of them would look like the sort of pyrotechnics you saw in this particular episode. All right, folks, well, thanks for watching. If you want to see me react to more of my own greatest moments, all you have to do is leave some comments down below. Tell me which videos you'd like to see me comment on, and we'll see you here next time.